Hi guys, so here we are again talking about coaching, and today I'm here with Yannick. Siawash sadly couldn't join us today, but yeah, we're looking forward to seeing him again in our next session.
Indeed. Shout out to Siawash.
Well, and today's question is partly inspired by recent events, but what if I have a hangover? Should I cancel my session? Good question. I was going to say, maybe I'm still hungover.
I'm still laughing about it because, part of this was a joke because, last time that was the event and, this wasn't a coaching session that was canceled. But there is a really real question in there that I think is quite relevant. And I'm so glad that we joked and then you took it up because what happens if I'm not in the ideal state of mind for coaching? What happens if I'm distracted or if there's something going on? Do I owe it to my clients to be in the most ideal state? And hangover isn't a hangover, right? Mm. So in that sense, it could be anything. Couldn't be a fight you had with your partner, or a stressful situation, or feeling a little bit under the weather or ill. I've had a few coaches I've been supervising who got the COVID vaccine and anticipated that perhaps they might feel a little bit under the weather, and should they clear their schedule for the next 2 days just in case. So in that case, in that sense, it's a really, really helpful question, I reckon.
I also think it's a really good question, actually, and as you're just speaking there, I think there's almost like lots of directions. I think you can really make the case for and against almost. So I'm really curious to start a conversation. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where do we start, right?
Where do we start?
I guess, what's the extent? Where's the threshold? I think is the important question, because what's an ideal state to coach in? We want to be present, right? We don't want to be distracted. Is it ever possible to be 100% present and 100% non-distracted? To what extent do events that are with us play into it? And at what threshold is it no longer appropriate to coach somebody? Because we always have something distracting us, right? Something happens outside the window. Like there was a bird earlier, and I can see it from the window, and I'm like, part of me is distracted. That bird could also be a slight headache, for example. Mm-hmm. If I have a slight headache, I don't think it affects how I coach. Usually I just get drawn into the conversation and I'm fully present. Mm-hmm. But occasionally I might notice that the headache is still there. And I just, put that in my box or like manage it. What's the threshold after which it's no longer appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, what's that quote? With great something comes great responsibility. No, with great power comes great responsibility. I mean,
with great hangover comes great responsibility.
I mean, certainly. No, I mean, yes, I think that threshold mark is really interesting to explore, at another level, for coaches who are here listening to this. It's kind of also the question of what kind of, how does being a coach impact our wider lifestyle, and kind of like what's the demand it makes of us, and kind of what does it ask of us to maintain in terms of like lifestyle and routine and stuff to kind of show up in the best way possible for our clients. So that's kind of intuitively kind of where my mind goes with the question. I'm also really interested in kind of this threshold perspective. So I don't know if you want to kind of elaborate on that, or.
Yeah, I mean, what it makes me think about is routines ahead of a coaching session, and I believe we had an episode on that at some point, where we check in with ourselves and just ground ourselves, and so that we can be fully present. And pain is an interesting thing, right? Because pain really draws our attention to it. But then there's different kinds of pain. If it's a slight headache, is that the kind of pain that would distract me from being present? I would want to know, is this likely to draw my attention away? Mm-hmm. And if it's constantly drawing my attention away, or even quite regularly, then perhaps it's not a good state to coach in. To what extent is that going to influence the client? It might also depend on the client. What kind of client is this? Is this the client that is not particularly aware of what's going on with me as a coach? Or is this one of those super perceptive clients that will definitely pick up on something is a bit different today with my coach?
Mm-hmm.
What would happen if I say, oh yeah, I've got a slight headache. So, is that okay? Would that be appropriate to say?
Mm-hmm.
If I have a headache and it's bothering me and it's taking my attention away, personally, I know how headaches affect me and I know my threshold. So I know this is the kind of headache where I have to clear my day. Mm-hmm. And this is the kind of headache that I'll forget after 2 minutes into the conversation because I'm just really drawn in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think, that touches on that kind of idea of personal responsibility, really. It's kind of knowing yourself well enough to kind of be able to gauge and to be honest, I think also about the fact of where you are perhaps borderline still incompetent, where maybe even a situation of, something that's affected you could be relevant and contribute almost in some ways to the conversation, mm-hmm. and maybe take it to new places, to be open, not to be so kind of self-judging or kind of self-critical in a way, mm-hmm. Depending on what the pain is that we're talking about.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, so thinking of my situation that we've alluded to abundantly from the other week, I was certainly debilitated, and that was absolutely unplanned. And, I was very diligent and texted the night before saying, see you guys tomorrow. And then I had just a complete brain fart, if you will, and completely forgot about my commitment and just had my first fun night out since COVID in a long, long time. Anyway, apologies for that. But, it was clear to me that my showing up wouldn't be fair to anyone really, and wouldn't contribute or benefit anyone. So, and I think, certainly thinking of usual kind of scheduled client meetings, I think that's somewhere where certainly I'd never let it get to that point, but I would also probably, I tend to schedule my weeks in alignment with my work commitment and responsibilities, because I just simply know how I want to show up and what that demands of me, and for me kind of physical and mental well-being, which I invest a lot of energy into kind of to show up in the best way possible. Like that's kind of something I've committed to as a person in my coaching. But realistically, we're all humans, we're all kind of swayed by unexpected events, by our kind of own humanity of being vulnerable and having swaying emotions, as well as kind of having a social life and commitments. And to what extent do you let that infringe or have to kind of manage that around a career or a profession in which you part of what you bring to your work is kind of showing up in that clear-headed and very present and open way. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's also important, I think, to take into consideration what's at stake and how do we present it? How do we have that conversation? For example, it's different if that's a client that has something really important and it's time sensitive. And if you were to cancel the session, it has a big impact on the client versus maybe a supervision client or somebody where the coaching is more of a sounding board. And so I think that's something to take into account, but I think it's mostly important how we have that conversation. For example, you've just been very honest about it, and we really appreciated that. And actually, we have a really good conversation now because you were so open about it. If you say, well, I just got really drunk yesterday and I forgot about my sessions tomorrow, maybe that can impact the coaching relationship. How seriously is that coach taking the relationship? If you've been spot on the whole time and then you say, hey, look, I fucked up, or I made a mistake, and I want to be 100% present with you. And I think today I make it to about 85 and I believe that's not enough for you. That's why I would like to cancel the session unless you tell me, I don't really mind, but it's really important that I talk to this today. I think if we have that if we set it up as part of a conversation, rather than us saying no or yes, then I think we can use the philosophy of letting the client take the lead to allow the client to make a decision. If it's still a decision, last time for you, it was not a conversation because, you knew. And, part of me was when Siawash as well, we're kind of tempted to have it and see what it's like.
That would have been cruel. That would have been cruel and very mute for everyone, probably. But maybe funny to watch.
Yeah, so the way we can communicate it showing our values and our commitment and our dedication, and that we're really sorry and we really wanted to, but that, we want to do this properly if we do it. And I think probably clients really appreciate that. Whenever I had to cancel a session and I laid out why that was important, it usually strengthened the relationship rather than what I sometimes was worried about, break something.
Nice.
The other thing that I was thinking about was it doesn't have to be a hangover, right? Some things are just like that, just happen. And I'm wondering about, for example, menstrual cramps or period cramps or pains. I'm not something that I experience, but certainly something that I've heard from clients that I've been working with. They're like, I'm not sure if I can do today's session because it's a bit unpredictable, or in the days before I'm just in a very different state of mind, and it's more difficult for me to do this or that or the other. So I know it can affect us, and some of it affects regularly. And I wonder what that's like for you. Or there's going to be a lot of coaches out there who might be wondering, what if my mood changes, or what if I'm in pain? Is it still okay to go ahead with the coaching? So you're here, so
I mean, I'm very grateful that I don't suffer from, it sounds like we're speaking specifically about menstrual related kind of discomforts. So yeah, but I imagine if that was something that I knew I was going to have on a regular basis, I imagine I would somewhat kind of schedule or cater for that by kind of, changing my schedule that week, potentially, to kind of anticipating that. I think, that's the best we can ever do. Or if we have a very busy week with a wedding or a big birthday, or something that is kind of something that in a way I guess we shouldn't have to like compromise and let go of all of our social kind of good things in our lives, right? So occasionally we just have to kind of cater and plan ahead or around that. I mean, I think something that on the other hand has affected me more personally is just kind of, I feel like in the last year, I've just had an unfortunate series of life events, and that's definitely caused me to kind of gradually have to step back in a way, because I realized that I just couldn't show up in the way that I would want to and would demand of myself for my clients. And I think, that's an interesting, or that was very difficult for me, because I was at a point where I was just really starting to take off, and I was really kind of invested in feeling so kind of happy and excited, and I'd put so much energy into building the momentum, and then to have to kind of pull myself back gradually as a result of just unfortunate and unforeseen circumstances, that's really kind of felt like a bit of that's really kind of halted that kind of energy behind it. But I think was a good choice and was necessary for me. I just had that sense of kind of, who do I want to be as a coach, and how do I want to show up, and what do I want to give to my clients, and is that realistic for me to demand of myself and to be able to provide right now? And I just had to be honest at one point and say, like, no, right now that's not possible, and I'm just going to wait till things kind of rebalance and I feel like I can come back in full energy. So that's another example of, I think it's just knowing yourself well enough and knowing kind of what it is who you want to be as a coach, and then just kind of having to work around that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, this was a much richer conversation than initially I had thought.
It all started with a hangover.
Yeah, right. A hangover can be a fantastic learning experience.
Apparently so. I definitely learned my lesson. Don't get hangover on a school night.
It's never too late to learn. Thank you, Nicki, for being open about bringing that in, which started as a joke and actually turned out to be a really cool conversation. Thank you. Anything else that you would want to add? I think we're done here.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm happy.
Cool.
Awesome.
Great. Well, thank you. I'd love to hear you guys' stories out there. If anybody's got a story about similarly related things, or just your stance on when to cancel sessions, where's your personal threshold? We're always curious about your views, because we don't want to just talk about coaching the 2 or 3 of us. This is supposed to start conversations. So have those conversations. If you have them with us, fantastic. If you have them with colleagues, fantastic. If you have them with yourself, excellent. So do it. Talk about it.
I'd love to hear, actually, has anyone ever had their best coaching session ever whilst on a hangover? I mean, can't rule out that possibility. Some people it really kind of works for them. So let us know.
Cool. See ya. Thank you for being with us today. I appreciate your commitment to learning and growing as a coach. Just a few things before you go. First of all, we're doing this for you, so if there's anything you'd like us to talk about, do send us a question. Secondly, we're not doing this for profit, so we rely on your support to help us reach as many coaches as we can. So if you can send this episode to a friend or tell a fellow coach about what we're doing here, maybe you can subscribe or leave us a review, or even support us on Patreon. That would be amazing. And lastly, you can find us across all major platforms. So whether you like to watch or you like to listen or you like to download episodes and listen to it in your car while you're driving through somewhere with no internet, you can do so too. And that's it from us. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time.